Testing 1, 2. English. I'm
Yep.
going to give you a heads up if I've got it.
Check 1 2, check 1 2, check 1 2, 1 2, check 1 2. Check 1 2.
Check 1 2 1 2 3. Check check.
It's my one.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If I could ask members of council and the public to take a seat, we'll begin the meeting in 1 minute. On va commencer la réunion dans 1 minute. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Bienvenue à la Conseil municipal de la Ville d'Ottawa pour le 31 août 2016. Welcome to Ottawa City Council for the 31st of August, 2016. It is with great sadness that Ottawa has lost an important community leader in recent weeks. As our community mourns for the passing of the Honourable Maurice Boulanger, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on his numerous civic and personal contributions to our city. Pendant plus de 20 ans de service,
for over more than 20 years of public service, Maurice represented with passion residents of Ottawa-Vanier.
Father and friend, Maurice a laissé à la communauté un héritage impressionné.
He left an impressive heritage to all, and he always fought for the rights of the citizens.
No, Ottawa-Vanier contains some of the city's most economically privileged residents, as well as many of its most vulnerable. Maurice se battait pour tout et toute.
He was fighting for every cause that needed to be defended,
regardless of their status in life. Whether opposing the Kettle Island Bridge project, supporting New Canadians, ou dans sa rôle de champion,
or in his role of champion of the Franco-Ontarian and Francophone community in Ottawa and in the country. Maurice worked with great dedication to maintain the Montfort Hospital opened and to raise public attention on this issue.
Personal tenacity and strength that reached across partisan and personal barriers to bring people together. This strength has left an impact on our city and country in many, many ways, and will be felt in our community for years to come. Despite the tragic realities of ALS, Maurice's stewardship was able to rally Canadians from all walks of life until the very end. J'offre mes plus sincères condoléances.
I'd like to offer my deepest condolences to Catherine and the family and all those affected by the emptiness left by his departure.
Silence as we stand to remember the Honourable Maurice Boulanger. Merci. If you could remain standing, and I'll ask Councillor Kakesh to introduce our very special guest who will sing our national anthem.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Very pleased to welcome some talented youth, juniors from the Barhaven Music Academy, along with their director, Morgan Strickland, as well as co-owner Ashley Martin. The Barrhaven Music Academy is one of the top centers for music education in Ottawa. With over a dozen staff and more than 350 weekly students, it offers private music lessons in a variety of instruments for all ages and levels, as well as a number of group programs developed to enhance performance and musicianship skills. In 2015, BMA was a finalist for the New Business of the Year at the Ottawa West Ottawa Board of Trade's Nepean Business Achievement Awards. Joining us today for the special performance of the National Anthem is Ava Bernecki, Neve Brown, Emery Gaskin, Chloe Way, Tatiana Kairuz, Margarita Shaket, Callie Walker, and Alex Sue. The floor is all yours.
Well, thank you very, very much, Councillor Kakish, for bringing those talented young people from Barrhaven to start our council meeting today. At this time, I'd like to invite Francis and Ronald McDonnell to the podium for this meeting's City Builder Award presentation, and invite their councillor, George Derouz, to join us as well. Francis and Ronald, if you'd like to come forward. And Councillor Derouz. J'inviterai aussi son conseiller. Just come right here, please. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Ronald and Francis have enjoyed an impressive career of community involvement and philanthropy for many, many years. For over 2 decades, the McDonnells have made a name for themselves as tireless volunteers who always find time to support their many important community causes. Across the region, 365 days a year, and regardless of the conditions, the McDonnells' passion for giving back to the community has touched the lives of many in our city. We also have something in common, a passion for bazaars. You like bazaars? I like bazaars. People tell me I'm very bizarre. I go to so many bazaars. The McDonnells have been vital supporters of Briere Continuing Care and their biannual bazaar for many years. En effet, les McDonnell apportant de
The McDonald's have been vital supporters of Briere Continuing Care and their biannual bazaar for many years now.
their impressive networks, the McDonnells pick up and deliver new and used items and bring them to charitable or not-for-profit organizations such as the St. Louis Residence in the East End. Not only do they make vital contributions to the bazaar by arranging items to be donated, they raise funds, encourage volunteers, even bring their granddaughters to shop. These important donations don't stop at the Briere and their residences. The McDonnells supply many organizations with regular high-quality merchandise for their residents or bazaars such as the Ottawa Mission and Sisters of Charity. And Mr. McDonnell mentioned you've got a whole truckload full of clothing that's going to the Union Mission, so we have to make sure we're on time today, right? So you don't want to be late for that mission to the mission. Their hard work vulnerable in our community. Funds and merchandise collected by the McDonnells goes direct to programs, services, special projects, and residents who may otherwise not receive the aid they require. Les fonds amassés et les biens
Funds and merchandise collected by the McDonald's goes direct to programs, local programs.
needed service to our community, and it's a pleasure on behalf of Councillor DeRuse to present you with the Mayor's City Builder Award for the tremendous work you do each and every day, and for the inspiration you are for so many other people in Greeley, Osgood Ward, and the whole City of Ottawa. Congratulations. If you want to just come out here, we'll just take a little picture.
Mayor Watson, members of council, and visitors. We're so pleased to have this award, but the real honor goes to the people that donate to us and the volunteers at the other end that receive and sort everything. Thank you so much.
Well done. Well done.
I love too, but a little nervous.
You should. You did a great job.
Yeah, thank you.
So Georgie helped you there.
Very much.
Your family's there.
Oh, they are.
There we go.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And it's nice a number of their family members are here with us today, and including, I think, their granddaughter, who's a bylaw officer with the city. So I asked if she'd ever given the family a ticket, and she said no. It gives me great pleasure to have the opportunity to recognize the actions of a very special 13-year-old young woman from Orleans whose quick thinking saved her siblings from their burning home. I'd ask that Annika Boucher come forward, along with Jody Middick, their counselor, Annika's counselor, and the Chief of Fire Services, Jerry Pingatore. Welcome, Annika. I know you have your family members here, your mom and dad, and your brother and sister, and here's Councillor Middick. Je suis très heureux de vous accueillir à cette
I'm very pleased to welcome you to this important presentation.
honored with a special commendation of bravery for her quick actions on July 5th when fire broke out in their family home when she was babysitting her two younger siblings. Her actions that day are a significant reminder of the importance of a home fire escape plan, one that was prepared by her family and then was executed flawlessly when it was needed. The Boucher family had discussed and practiced their home fire escape plan together, and importantly, had set a meeting place at a neighbor's home. The family's planning and Annika's quick thinking and response were instrumental in keeping everyone safe and in getting the fire extinguished quickly. I also want to take this opportunity to commend our emergency responders for their quick and professional actions that day. Many of our residents are familiar with the story and likely saw Annika being interviewed on the evening news. I was so impressed with her calm and articulate way that she was able to recount her actions, even while noting that something horrible could have happened. Thankfully, despite considerable damage to the home, everyone was safe. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to publicly thank and recognize Annika for the smart response this brave young woman took during an emergency. The fire was damaging, of course, but we're all thankful that there were no injuries when things could have been much worse. It's now my pleasure to introduce Councillor Middick to say a few words and then join the Fire Chief and I in the presentation as we congratulate Annika. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Annika, you know, I was reading the story and something jumped out at me. You guys, I'm first of all impressed that the Boucher family had their fire evacuation plan. We practice it with our daughters at home as well. And part of the plan involved not wasting time to try and rescue the family's pets, the two cats. And we've all read the stories about people that pass or unfortunately lose trying to rescue the pets, and you didn't do that. But fortunately, our Ottawa Fire Service showed up just in time to rescue the cats, and so they're just as safe as the rest of the family. And I know Anna wants to speak, so I'm going to give her as much time as she wants at the podium. Anna?
It's an honor to receive this award, considering maybe the circumstances that have offered me this opportunity. And I'd also like to thank the Ottawa Fire Department for coming so quickly and saving our pets, of course, because they are an important part of our family, but I'm glad we didn't waste time and that they were here just as quickly as we needed them.
Good job. family, maybe the family members, mom and dad.
You guys want to come up?
Come up. Come on
No?
up here.
No, they're good?
You're shy.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks, Anna. Good job. Chief?
Well, congratulations again, Annika. We're very, very proud of you, and it's great to have your mom and dad and brother and sister. Alors, merci pour votre participation à cette réunion.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Madam Deputy Clerk, roll call, please.
Councillor Minette.
Present.
Councillor Middick.
Here.
Councillor Harder. Hang on a second. Here. Councillor Wilkinson. Present. Councillor El Shantiri.
Present.
Councillor Kadri.
Present.
Councillor Taylor.
Here.
Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Eglai.
Here.
Councillor Deans. Here. Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Conseiller Fleury.
Si.
Councillor Nussbaum.
Present.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Councillor Leeper.
Here.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Chernyshenko.
Present.
Conseiller Cloutier.
Present.
Conseiller Blais.
Here.
Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Kakish.
Present.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Mayor Watson.
You see?
You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Confirmation of minutes, adoption de procès verbaux pour le 13 juillet 2016 for the meeting of 13th of July 2016. Carried. Declaration of interest, including those originally from prior meetings. Déclaration de l'intérêt, conflit d'intérêt. None. Communications as presented. Regrets. No one has regretted. Motion to introduce reports. Motion portant présentation de rapport. Conseiller Moffat, appuyé par Conseiller Middick.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Middick, that the Community Protective Services Committee Report 16 and Planning Committee Reports 29A and 30 be received and considered, and that pursuant to subsection 35.5 of the Procedure Bylaw 2014-441, Council receive and consider Item 1 of Agricultural Affairs Committee Report 19, Item 1 on the agenda, and that the rules of procedure be suspended to receive and consider Item 2 of the Agricultural Affairs Committee Report 19, Item 2 on the agenda. Waiver of the rules is being requested due to timelines in order to permit the completion of in-ground works prior to the end of this construction season and mitigate the risk of delay to critical project timelines.
On the motion, carried. Adopté. Committee reports, Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee Report number 19, rapport numéro 19 du Comité de l'Agriculture et des Affaires Rurales. Item number 1, Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2008-250, Omnibus Amendments Q3 2016. Carried on the report and carried on the summary of submissions. Carried. Item 2 from ARAC is front-ending agreement for design and construction of the Richmond Sanitary Trunk Sewer. Carry. Next item is Community and Protective Services Committee Report number 16, rapport numéro 16 du Comité des Services Communautaires et de Protection, prohibiting the use of water pipes in public places and workplaces. I think we'll come back to that because there's a motion, and I know members will, I believe, have some questions for Dr. Levy. Planning Committee Report number 29A, rapport numéro 29A du Comité de l'Urbanisme. We have a motion by Councillor Harder and Tierney. I believe this is on the signs issue, so we'll come back to that as well because I think there'll be some comments and there's a memo from staff, so we'll come back to that. Planning Committee Report number 30, rapport numéro 30, Confederation Line Proximity Study Fees Zone of Influence. Carried. Development Charges Complaint 60 Camelot Drive. Carried. New requirements for site plan control in Sandy Hill. Councillor Fleury has a motion. Does anyone wish to speak on this, or can we deal with this now? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Harder has a motion, seconded by Councillor Fleury. Does
But
anyone, should we come back to this, or is Councillor Harder?
Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to defer for comments if anyone needs them to Councillor Fleury. This was his report that he brought to Planning Committee and his resolution just yesterday.
And my understanding from staff is that this motion that you're putting forward is agreeable to all parties. Okay, so on the motion, carried. On the report as amended, carried. Bulk consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the bulk consent agenda?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Point of order, Councillor.
In two separate memos from Mr. Moser to City Council in the last week, we were told that there would be a motion coming forward at today's council meeting on the federal infrastructure transit funding, and I don't see it on the agenda. I'm wondering where that is.
I think I can comment on that. It's going to FEDCO next week. Next week's FEDCO, so there's a chance for public participation.
I think it's fantastic. It's going to FEDCO so the public can input, but we were told that it was coming today, and I know some members of council had some questions and perhaps some direction that they would have liked to give in advance of that FEDCO consideration. So it's just, I think, unfortunate that we're told that it's coming here and we anticipate it, prepare questions, and then it disappears.
Okay, thank you. On the bulk consent, carried. All right, so we'll go back to the first item that we held, which is Community and Protective Services Committee prohibiting the use of water pipes in public places and workplaces. So we have a motion. I'll just ask Councillor DeRuse to move the motion, seconded by Councillor Kakish.
Okay. This motion, I'll talk quick about it to a member of council. I do sit on Community Protective Service myself and Councillor Kakish, and we've heard lots of comment in the last few days about it. I just want to make sure that people understand and people realize that what we're doing right now, we're going to be shutting some businesses down in the city of Ottawa. And then by me sitting at CPS for almost 2 years, I know how we compromise and we work with different businesses when we had the file of the pet stores and whatnot and all the business we do at committees. And this file in particular, we are trying to ban the shisha pipe in some businesses in the city of Ottawa, but the ban is going to be, the committee decided that they go to April. But this is the business of, there is few businesses that they only sell and they have solo business that they do that shisha. And these people, they'll be, if we pass this motion today, they'll be really shutting down right away, because even though this business does open in the winter, but because it's a seasonal and it's outside a lot, they don't have enough time to change the line of the food of the businesses they have to be able to surviving and to keep up to their leases and making sure that they have different items on their menu. So after discussing with Councillor Kakish and a few other people in the committee, and I did speak a little bit about it with our chair, Diane, and I know there is not a big support on pushing it, but I still feel that we as a city councillor look at the sensitivity of these businesses and not to be able to cut them cold turkey and give them enough time, work with them to making sure they phase like anything else we do in the city. So it's not a political stand, and I'm not trying to do anything different. All what I'm asking, it's give them another 5 months extension that will give them next summer between April and September to be able to phase out and to be able to promote. And if they have to work with their landlord and their leases to make sure they continue or change their business line, they'll have that time. So that's where the motion is coming from, and I can read it. Whereas shisha is an important cultural practice of many ethics groups across the city, and whereas the city should allow businesses who rely on shisha sales enough time to change their business model, sell their business, or terminate their leases within a reasonable time frame, and whereas cultural festivals add to the vibrancy of the city and offer insight into the cultural practices of those circled countries which may include the use of shisha within a social context. Therefore, it's resolved that the charging phase of the bylaw be amended to begin on September 30th, 2017. And second one is council direct city staff to establish special permit to which festivals and events may apply that will allow them the use of water pipe for the duration of the festivals, and staff establish a cost for the permit so that the issuance of such a permit is cost neutral for the city. Thank you, and I'm not sure if Councillor Kakish have to say anything.
Okay, Councillor El Shantiri, please, on the motion or the report.
So my question first to Mr. O'Connor. Mr. O'Connor, a few years ago when the discussion was about the shisha, there was a case law in Vancouver. I think it's about if the shisha is a cultural practice or just obviously a social gather. So can you tell me about that case law with the Supreme Court of BC? What was the result of that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. In 2014, a number of shisha shops in the city of Vancouver were charged under their particular bylaw, which, like ours being proposed today, banned shisha. So a couple of the places took offense. They went to court, and in front of the trial judge, they made arguments along the lines that the councillor suggested, that this was a cultural matter, that this was in fact part of their religion, and they argued constitutional law, saying that it was against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. In a lengthy 38-page decision, the trial judge disagreed and convicted them on all of the charges. It went to the Supreme Court of British Columbia in 2015. At that point in time, they only argued strenuously, is the way the appeal judge writes it, for the religious aspect of the charter arguments. And again, he was not persuaded by their arguments, and he dismissed their appeal. So we checked recently with the British Columbia Court of Appeal, and they say there is no appeal on the books for this particular matter. So it would appear that the matter is settled in British Columbia. In Toronto, Mr. Mayor, there was argument with regards, I think it was August 22nd. The City of Toronto has a similar bylaw where they have outlawed shisha. A number of those shops have brought an application to the Superior Court of Justice. It was heard on August 22nd. It was actually referenced by one of the delegates at the committee last week, and there's anticipated that there will be a decision from that court probably later on this fall, late September, October. That's a guess.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Mr. O'Connor. My question to Dr. Levy, I know this is a public health, obviously, issue. And I asked you this before, and forgive me, I haven't been on the committee, so I haven't followed up with you on it. Have any study been done by the Canadian Public Health about the e-cigarette and about the shisha? I understand this file. I understand there's two types of shisha, one the herbal with no nicotine and one with tobacco, and I know there's a challenge for us every time trying to find out which one been used, and there's a cost affiliated with it to take it to a lab in Winnipeg. So I understand all this. I don't need this. I just want to know, because there's some conflicted, and I'm not a doctor, but there's a conflicted opinion here. Some say the e-cigarette is helping people who smoke cigarette to quit the habit and substitute with an E, which is a lot less harm to the body than a real cigarette. So by banning those e-cigarettes, are we then pushing people back to smoke cigarettes? It's on now. Okay.
Thank you for the question, Mayor. In response, I would just preface my comments by acknowledging that the original direction from Council through the Board of Health to our department was to look specifically at issues regarding e-cigarettes or so-called e-cigarettes and vaping of e-cigarettes, issues around the medicinal and other use of marijuana, and issues around the use of water pipes. And in fact, the question as posed I think reflecting the state of the science and the state of the public debate does blend all of those issues together. But as we worked through the science and other information around these issues, we ended up recommending to the Board of Health that we deal only with the issues around water pipes at this time. And the reason we didn't mix into that mix the issues around e-cigarette vaping is that the province is currently doing that right now. So your point that there is debate about whether vaping of e-cigarettes may in fact aid in cessation for some people who are addicted to traditional tobacco delivery mechanisms like cigarettes is indeed a debated point in the literature. Nevertheless, within the public health community, the ultimate conclusion with respect to both vaping of e-cigarettes, at least in the local Canadian context, as well as the use of water pipes, is that the exact opposite is the risk. That the risk of allowing or signaling that as a community and as a society we wish to allow a different form of vaping, smoking, of any substance, and usually it ends up in some way when we test it to include tobacco, but any substance is in fact harmful. The air quality literature is definitive that the toxic products occur from these materials. And in fact, my biggest concern is one of my biggest concerns as the community physician is that we send a signal to our youth that in fact we're renormalizing the use of smoking. So we do see that the use of water pipes, unlike the use of traditional tobacco delivery systems, is in fact increasing in our community, especially amongst youth.
Well, I do appreciate that, Dr. Levy. What I'm having a little bit of challenge with, there's no real study about the herbal shisha or the water. So are we dealing with it from a nuisance? Just so for the record, before, I'm unlike any colleague. I never smoked this. I never been in those shisha bars, so I don't even know what they are other than hearing from our staff. Some of those shisha bars have staff working there, and those staff also smoke shisha, and clearly it's a shisha bar. It's not a restaurant. It's not other than just shisha. So I'm not advocate one way or another, but I just want to understand, are we doing it for health reason, or we just because we see the increase among young people using the shisha?
Thank you, Mayor. Members of Council, the short answer is these are health reasons. To my left is a binder that is a copy of studies that we've found regarding the use of shisha material. There are several studies. Some of them are of relatively low quality. Some of them are quite recent. But there's certainly a body of evidence now that I believe is sufficiently strong to urge governments at all levels to take action in this regard, and that's evidence about health impact.
My other question is, if we know the provincial government will be dealing with the e-vape cigarette, wouldn't it be wise to wait and have the province have it province-wide ban on this instead of? And I know the city would like to say we are leading in this area and banning, because that's something sexy, because we were the first one to say we ban smoking. But wouldn't that be wisely to wait for the province if the province is going to deal with this shisha?
Thank you, Mayor. The province has already indicated which areas it's planning to address, and has in fact taken that action in the promulgation of Bill 178, I believe it is, this year. And during our workup for our presentation of our recommendations to our Board of Health, we did confirm with the province that on this particular area there's nothing planned. And so, in fact, we're making the recommendation to close what we perceive to be a regulatory loophole that allows for this particular loophole to be exploited and for health impacts to occur because of that.
Okay, well, Mr. Mayor, I do appreciate the fact my colleague have a motion about the festivals. Some of the festival, I think maybe one or two, serve the shisha tent and it's all contained in one area. I'm not so really concerned about it because in speaking with the Lebanese festival president, there is there to keep everybody who smoke that shisha in one area versus have them all over the place. But I don't think that's make it or break it for them, because I don't think the attraction of the Lebanese festival is the shisha, just to be on the record for that. But what I have concerned really, not given the business people, especially the shisha bar who establish just to serve shisha, not giving them enough time to phase it in. I have a little bit of concern. I would love to see the province stepping in and make it province-wide, and that will be easy for all of us to live by that. But to have one city have it and then have Almont or Empire or other municipality, if we care about the health of our Canadian, I think it should be province-wide or maybe federal decision. But I find it ironically, we're looking for or our government, federal government, wants to legalize marijuana, but then shisha without, I know if the tobacco one is harmful, but the herbal one, we haven't seen a benefit, we haven't seen the effect of the herbal one to suggest we should ban it, but then we have 9 store dispensaries want to sell marijuana now, and that's okay with that. So I find it a little bit...
If you can wrap up, Councillor.
I am ramping up. I'm just venting now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Caudry, the Chair of our Health Board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And just a couple of questions to our Medical Officer of Health regarding the motion that's on the table for us to deal with. Dr. Levy, just a question in terms of time that has been raised through this motion. Time available for these businesses to readapt or rechange. How long has this item been on the forefront with the public and the consultation that you held with the public?
Thank you. Mayor, members of Council, the issue first arose in 2012 here in Ottawa as part of our discussions and during our consultations at the time that we modernized the bylaws, the relevant bylaws in 2012. We certainly publicized our interest in going down this route. So that was, I would say, how long we've had an active debate in this city and an active discussion that I'm aware of and have been part of is about 4 years now. Certainly it's been fundamental to the question in the public eye since Council directed interest in this, which was November 2015, so that's about 8 months ago, I guess 9 months ago, and I think it's been part of the public discourse for at least maybe 6 to 12 months prior to that, because several other municipalities in Ontario have been addressing this question. Toronto and Peel both moved within the previous 12 months in this direction as well. So depending on where you start, I'd say somewhere between 2012 and November 2015, it's certainly been quite clear that the city is actively contemplating this kind of move.
Thank you for that, Doctor. And second question on that same scenario is, when was the first shisha bar that we were made aware of opened in Ottawa? Do we have any time frame on that?
Councillors, I'm not aware of the definitive answer to that question. There have been bars open for several years. We've been inspecting bars certainly at least for the last 8 or 10 years. We've been going into into bars as part of our tobacco enforcement effort with bylaw and regulatory services and other jurisdictional enforcers for at least that long. We have seen some spout up within the last 2 or 3 years as well, so some closed, some open, and certainly we've seen some open, or at least appear to come online, offering the product within the last 2 years.
During the public consultation, Dr. Levy, you had X number of comments provided to Ottawa Public Health. Was there ever an issue raised from a business or from even an individual regarding the fact about the cultural aspect of this shisha bars? And if so, how strong was that sentiment out there?
The issue has been raised from time to time from different quarters. I would subjectively grade that as not especially strong. It's been we've heard from different members of communities that hail from countries in the Middle East that are traditionally associated with the use of water pipes, and we've heard a cross-spectrum of opinion during our conversations. Several individuals have argued that this is really not that fundamental to the cultural practices, while others have argued that it is. So I'd say it's been on the radar, but it hasn't been a heavily emphasized point in our conversations with people. From a data perspective, what we observe is that the use of water pipes in our community appears to be more prevalent amongst young people, high school age students and university age or college age youth who are experimenting and sometimes using shisha or at least water pipe agents as part of the social experience of their age group, and that of course crosses beyond the traditionally thought of cultural groups.
And the public consultation that OPH held, that's through a normal process that we do all our public consultation with, right? Am I correct on that?
Yes, indeed. Any time we do community engagement and community consultations, we do online work, we do outreach work, and occasionally when we have resources, we do random telephone survey work. And indeed, on this occasion, we did all of those.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And Mr. Mayor, those are all the questions I have. I just want to make one comment that listening to the response from Dr. Levy, the public consultation alone was almost a year or more. So in terms of the time factor, I think the businesses have had that time. As much as I'm a former small business owner, I do empathize with the businesses. I also look at the position of the city, how we made this city smoke-free, started back in 2000, and this is just another piece to that puzzle going forward. So I will be supporting that and not supporting the motion going forward, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Cadre. Councillor Brockington, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning. Thank you to the movers for the motion and allowing us to discuss and debate this a bit further. It's my understanding, having attended the committee meeting which voted 9-1 in favor of the staff recommendation, that there were concerns about the timelines to implement, and the committee actually amended the implementation date to be April 3rd. That's when the charges would be laid. So we're talking about 7 months right now, 7 months to allow businesses to readapt and re-evolve themselves into entities and to offer products and services to their customer bases that would be in line with the ban if City Council so chooses. It's my understanding that these establishments aren't zoned a social club or water pipe bar. They're zoned as eateries or restaurants, and I just want clarification or confirmation that that's the case, that all of these establishments that permit water pipe usage on their premises are actually zoned as restaurants. Is that correct?
Mayor, I'd have to To be sure to give you a clear answer, I know there are some that are certainly restaurants and have this additional thing, but the three that are strictly doing that, I can ask staff to validate just to be sure to not give you misinformation.
Could Councillor Brockington have his mic, please?
Thank you. I won't turn it off. It's my understanding at committee that's what I heard, and my point is that there are many ways that these establishments can raise revenues, and 7 months allows them, I think, an opportune time to do that, to reflect on, what types of products and services to offer their clientele base. And Dr. Levy was quite clear at committee that even though I believe he himself, like many others, are sympathetic to the business realities and that the owners are under pressure to make this a go, that the overriding paramount factor in this discussion is the importance of preserving public health and not to sacrifice public health in this discussion and debate. And if we agree that the evidence is overwhelming that this the usage of the water pipes is bad for one's health, then why would we delay that? Why would we delay the implementation of a ban? Because if we all believe that we're making decisions in the public interest, then you would want to implement this sooner rather than later. So I think 7 months is a fair compromise. Yes, there are other cases where we have delayed implementation or delayed the effective date of a bylaw, but 7 months is 7 months. So I'm comfortable on that aspect, and will not be supporting the first part of this motion. The second part of the motion deals with festivals and events where water pipe usage is in place now. How many festivals or events are we aware of in this city where water pipes are used?
Mayor, the only one we're aware of is the Lebanese Fest. That said, the enforcement complexities of the second item are problematic for us.
Was this festival approached during your round of consultation, and if so, what was the feedback received from them?
Thank you. We reached out to the festival as part of our overall discussions and consultations. We wanted them to be aware of what was proposed. The collective input that we received is consistent with what Councillor El-Shantiri has referred to, and the essential summary of that is that while the festival does have an area in which some of this activity has been promoted in more recent years, it is not, as I understand it, fundamental to the perceived success of the festival, and it would not be problematic if the festival needed to comply with such direction from Council.
Just so I'm clear, because we've had discussions in my office and certainly heard the discussion at committee, the issue at this particular festival is that it is permitted under a tent. The tent has basically a roof or a ceiling. That's considered an enclosed structure. If this was a secluded, adults-only area without a roof or ceiling to the structure, would that then be permitted?
Mayor, I'll confirm through you with the city solicitor as to how the bylaw is structured, but the definition of enclosed would be covered. So if there was a roof to the tent, or if there are walls to the tent, that would constitute an enclosure in the way most of the different types of legislation or legislative tools at different jurisdictions have been created. With respect to the tent area, it's our understanding that not all of the individuals in that tent area are in fact there for the use of water pipes, that several other individuals participate. And so whatever the bylaw or the regulatory approach would be, our strong public health recommendation to individuals in that environment, whether covered or fully enclosed or not, would be that individuals who are not partaking should not be there.
Okay,
And indeed, individuals shouldn't be partaking.
I understand that, but it was my understanding that there was an area at this festival where people could go to engage in this activity that was barring minors from entering, and basically you're there because you want to smoke the water pipe or engage in conversation. Conversations that you and I have had is that you had an issue with, the roof or the ceiling of the tent, and that might keep the smoke in and contribute to the secondhand smoke. So I'm trying to address issues being raised by the mover, because I don't see his part two of this motion being successful. But if the issue is the structure where people are sitting under, they could do it maybe in the open, and there would be a way to balance the cultural practice at a festival which is on private property for adults. But maybe that's something the festival can pursue with bylaw and the city solicitor after today. But for the two pieces of this motion that are before us, I will not be supporting either one of them. I do believe that the recommendations via Ottawa Public Health are the right direction to go. I do believe that what needs to be driving Council's decision is what's in the best interest of public health and public safety, and therefore I will be supporting the recommendation coming from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Fleury, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start by saying that I will not be supporting the motion. I've gone through the debate and discussions at Ottawa Public Health, and following that last week at Community Protective Service. I think the discussion is healthy in considering the options in front of us. I'd like to address three components to the questions and some of the colleagues have raised. The province reviewed Bill 178, which looked at marijuana, also e-cigarettes. I participated in the process, in the consultation, and engaged with ministers and with MPPs on the matter. There's certainly, they see the importance of aligning the Smoke-Free Ontario Act in relation to e-cigarettes, and same with marijuana, but have not contemplated the hookah situation, for which they pointed to the example of the municipality of Toronto, which has installed a ban which has worked well, and has said that the City of Ottawa could enact such bylaws under our authority, which I was directed to. I think there's also the confusion relating to marijuana. Marijuana remains an illegal substance. As you know, there is a legal framework for medical marijuana, and the federal government is currently reviewing that process and will come up with a solution. I am told by the office of Bill Blair, who is the MP responsible for that project, that there will be no grandfathering rules relating to dispensaries and others, so that framework will be established clearly. Now, to go to the motion that's in front of us, I think it begs a few questions. One is, as a community, is there issues relating to hookah smoke and shisha smoking? And I would address those with two elements. One, that is that the product is not standardized. So we're always chasing, and I'm looking at Roger, who has done some investigation in the past relating to proving that there are tobacco in the shisha. That is one of the elements. The other is that we've heard clearly from Israel Levy that there are other toxic elements to the shisha that go far beyond the tobacco product. And I think on that basis, we are here to protect the public. We've done so with the Clean Up the Air. I want to highlight the work of our colleague, Councillor Stephen Blair, last term, specifically for parks and public spaces and patios, well received by our community. And I think in this case, Ottawa Public Health has done its due diligence, has met with the key stakeholders, has done a survey, and overwhelmingly we are told by our community that that is a ban that our community is comfortable with. So certainly we'll support the report. I will not be supportive of the motion because I think it is counterintuitive to the objectives of what we're trying to establish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Eagle-Eye, please.
Thank you very much. Just want to follow up on Councillor Brockington's question, because I think I know what he was trying to get at, but I'm not sure we got the answer. So, Mr. DeMonte, are any of the existing establishments licensed as shisha bars? In other words, do we issue that permit?
Mayor, no, we do not.
And so if they are operating with a permit, it would be as a restaurant, correct?
Correct. So to clarify the last element of the question, I didn't have the answer. So all of them have restaurant licenses, and the 3 that are strictly shisha bars, we do not issue any license or any permit for that. They're operating in a vacuum right now.
So though the ones that aren't serving food, are they in fact licensed as restaurants?
The ones that are serving food?
No, the ones that are not. Sorry, the ones that are not.
They're not licensed as restaurants.
So currently they're operating without any kind of a license?
That is correct.
So I'm not saying we do this, but in the current circumstances, can they be shut down today?
No, we could not under current bylaws.
No, they could not be shut down today. Okay. I'm not asking you to do that. You said they were in a vacuum. I'm just trying to figure out what that means.
Just for clarification, Mayor, to be clear, so they don't have a restaurant license. They don't have a license. We don't have that category of license for shisha bars. So they don't have that type of category of license to operate currently. We don't have that type of category.
Okay. And for those that are, which is the vast majority, which have a restaurant license, is there anything in the Board of Health recommendations, or CPS recommendations, I guess, through the Board of Health, is there anything in those recommendations that would impact on that majority of business owners to continue to operate as a restaurant?
Thank you. The answer is no. They could continue. Of course, they're subject to our food safety regulatory inspections, as all food establishments are, but there's nothing to stop them operating as a food establishment. And in fact, several during our consultations indicated that they would do that. And I suspect, this is going out on a limb, but my concern would be that from what we learned in the consultations, the expectation would be that they were not somehow disadvantaged, and they would seek, and as with the BIAs, seek a level playing field. So they would have concerns, I think. I'd expect we'd hear concerns if some were allowed a longer period and others were not because they were serving food.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Chernyshenko, please.
Thank you. As a member of the Board of Health, some of my other council colleagues here, we did receive quite a few presentations on this topic, and volumes of reports were available for us to read as well, from which the evidence seemed very clear to me. Fundamentally, what we're talking about is smoking by a different name, with the risks being the same or similar. The device through which people are choosing to smoke a substance that has been shown to have negative health effects, in a sense, the device to me becomes irrelevant. Of course, the whole e-cigarette is a new device, and because the province is exploring that, the Board of Health chose to leave that to the province and hear back on it. But this was a vacuum on the hookah, the water pipes. And what was clear to me is that the risks of smoking anything that contained nicotine and the other substances that are in tobacco were equal or possibly even greater than a best, if I can put it that way, filtered cigarette. But there were a couple of other elements to that which were very persuasive to me. All sorts of other substances find their way into the products that are being smoked. The ones that are labeled as containing tobacco or nicotine also contain a variety, if you will, chemical substances, as cigarettes do. But furthermore, many of the herbal, labeled as herbal products, contained chemical soups of products. And we cannot be and should not be in the business of analyzing every product that's made available for people to smoke. So the health concerns were just as valid, even when we're looking at the herbal products, even if they are in fact what they say they are. The final component for me was the cool factor. What we are seeing, and I have this corroborated by my 2 young adult children, going into a new place to try something new as a gateway introduction to smoking, many of them thinking that they were smoking an innocuous herbal product, not being aware that actually they were doing far more harm to themselves than they were. So, okay, consenting adult choosing to smoke, but the lack of adequate labeling, the lack of full understanding, that causes concern to me when we see a cool factor at a time when we are moving progressively away from smoking and its health risks, to see a new door opening that might be attracting people in because it's trendy at the moment. And as I say, that was corroborated by many friends and family members that was happening. Finally, on the question of cultural practice, yes, in some cultures and some members of those cultures, this may be a practice, but that's a very broad category. What is a culture? How many people are doing it? There are many practices that, for want of a better word, mainstream Ottawa culture has engaged in for decades, but we no longer allow, because we have found them to be dangerous, risky, threats to health, etc. And so I do not see the argument that it's a cultural practice as one to prevent we as a council from moving forward here. Yes, agreed, but this step will not in any way harm those cultures. And for people who choose to do so in the privacy of their home or in private places, they will still have the right to do that. Finally, I guess it would be a question and observation. I would like to see consistency in the end here. So anywhere in this city where someone is permitted to smoke a cigarette, should they choose to, they might still be allowed to use a water pipe and potentially an e-cigarette. We'll see where that goes. Would that be an accurate statement?
I share that vision entirely, and I believe that with the lattice, if I can put it that way, of provincial, local, and federal legislation, although there are still some questions relating particularly to marijuana and how things roll out, that is the consistent policy objective that certainly I think is in play with most levels of government, and that I would subscribe to and recommend.
So I guess in my 20 seconds remaining, more an observation than anything, I would say that let's pick a Red Blacks game at Lansdowne. There are a lot of smokers. There's a designated area where they are required to go. In theory, someone choosing to, it may sound absurd, but in theory, someone choosing to smoke a water pipe in that allowed area would still be allowed to. And in the same way, should marijuana be fully legalized, they would be allowed to there too. So to me, the issue then becomes around controlling where it's allowed, and that's why I support this initiative of our public health authorities to control where smoking is still allowed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Middick, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a quick question. It was touched on, but any festival can set up a smoking area regardless as long as it's not covered, right? Even if it's cigars or cigarettes, like whatever you want, pipes.
Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct, as long as it's on private property and not on city park property.
So even the festival, maybe that we were talking about, if they set up a smoking area without a roof, that wouldn't be permitted with the festival permit?
That's correct. If it's not in an enclosed space, and the Lebanese festival specifically, yes, being on private property, it would be permitted, yes.
Right, okay. Well, I just want to say, I'm okay if you want to smoke after all the information that's gone out, that go ahead, but I don't want to force any businesses that if we can give them the time to retool, I'm happy to do that. So I would support the first part of the motion, but if I could suggest to the movers that they remove the second part, then I could support the motion, and that's it.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor DeRuse, I guess this is over to you. You were nodding your head. Are you indicating you want to amend your motion by withdrawing the second clause?
Not right now, but I'm going to let Councillor Kakish touch on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Middick. Councillor Harder, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. My questions are about zoning, and so possibly for you, Mr. Moser, to jump in on this. But, you know, we have businesses that are long established in the city that Councillor Tierney and I, in one particular case, Papa Jack's Popcorn, if you recall, worked very hard trying to get the ability for him to have a business, which is a 20 or 30 years he's been running the business, but we were not able to accommodate that because we don't have in our zoning policy something that allows for that type of purpose. In this case, if they're not operating a restaurant, they're not serving food, where are we capturing the permission in the zoning policy for this type of use? And if we don't have that, why don't we?
Excuse me. Mr. Mayor, just thinking about it, my sense is that we wouldn't have a provision in the zoning bylaw related to it. If it's a restaurant, then it's regulated as a restaurant, and that's what we've heard staff tell us. I mean, to me, it's almost like an accessory use. I can't see us going in and looking to put it as a use. It's something that I think wouldn't be through the zoning bylaw. So my sense is zoning wouldn't be something we would pursue. It's basically an issue that's in front of council that is more related to regulation toward health issues and not zoning per se.
Which is what one would gather, because they're not operating a restaurant. They have a business license, but they don't have anything specific. I mean, you could argue the fact that there would be a loophole where more people actually could have businesses that aren't captured in a zoning bylaw or in a mandated under the health board or the bylaws for operating a business and the use of such business. That's very concerning to me. I think I'd like as a takeaway, Mr. Deputy Mayor, that we have a look at that, because we are seeing, for example, craft breweries. We're seeing that there's a lot of them now that are having restaurants in the Preston area and in Councillor Leeper and Councillor McKenney's area, where they actually have little mini warehouses that they're running and delivering out of the back of the shop as well. And we seem to figure that that's okay, but we have, this Papa Jack popcorn place that wanted to have front of the store with, people, local artisans selling their fudge and all that kind of stuff in the, pretty one on Innis Road he wanted to open, like in your area. And we weren't able to accommodate that. To me, that's a void. And I'd like us to have a look at it outside of the decision that I'll be making today. And so we'll come back with that.
Mr. Mayor, certainly take that under advisement. We'll be preparing our work plan for 2017 very soon.
And I'm not looking for you to include something for popcorn, okay, or something for water pipes or anything like that. What I am saying is are we fairly comfortable that we have a mechanism within the municipal organization of Ottawa that does review and legitimize businesses? Because I think, one, we could essentially be putting the public at risk, but two, I think that we have an unlevel playing field. So I don't want to spend a lot of time. I would say that a little bit of a think tank with the experts you have in your department, and then an IPD that comes out through the planning committee in the case of the zoning question would be adequate.
Be pleased to do that, Mr. Mayor. And in terms of the example of the breweries within restaurants, we certainly have addressed that. So I mean, we're able to deal them as accessory uses. So I mean, we'll take it away and provide some advice to council.
That would be great, because even commenting on that and the fact that, for example, somebody may be delivering product from the restaurant, which would be pizzas, subs, that sort of thing, is a far cry from delivering 10 cases of beer from the back of the warehouse. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Kakish, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. And I do see both sides of the argument, and I think a lot of the points that have been brought up were similar to the ones that we heard at Community and Protective Services Committee. I do think, on the one hand, that this is a slippery slope, and we are starting to tell people what's good and what's not good for them. And as was brought up at committee, there are a lot of things that we can ban from a public health perspective but are still legal. But on the other hand, I also see that we've made a lot of strides and progress in anti-tobacco legislation more than a decade ago in terms of banning smoking inside restaurants, and more progressive bylaws as well when it comes to parks and other places. But I want to focus this back on the motion that we have in front of us. And one of the things that came up from the businesses during committee was the fact that some of them were not aware or consulted properly. And I know a lot of work has been done, but there was some discrepancy about the number of establishments that actually exist. We had different numbers from staff versus the industry versus others that were there. And I'm sure staff did a great job in terms of trying to reach out to everyone, but some of them may be difficult to find, or they may be licensed in a different way, or they just did not pop up, because some of them could be restaurants versus a specific hookah lounge. So all we're trying to say here is to give them some more time. It's a few months. It's not a huge deal from our perspective, but for them, if they're tied up in a lease or if they're tied up in loans and they need time to adjust, that's what we're saying. We're not debating the health from a public health policy. I think the evidence is clear, in my mind at least, whether it's vaping, burning, whatever you're doing, you're putting something into your system. That's not a good thing. But again, that's up to people to decide that. If people want to go to the cigar lounge, and I do every once in a while, that's their decision to do that. So it's not for us to tell people that, but again, we've made a lot of strides in progress when it comes to anti-tobacco legislation, and now's not the time to turn the clock back on that. But this is specifically for the businesses, to give them the time to adjust, to give them the time to work a business plan and move into something else, or to rework the existing establishments that they have. I've heard mixed feedback, and Councillor Middick raised this as well. So what I think we can do here is to vote on these items separately, since there may be some consensus on one but not the other, as opposed to voting on the motion as a whole. So I'll be supporting these motions based on this motion and the two conditions in them, based on some of the feedback that I heard at Community and Protective Services from the businesses. It's not about the science. I think that's pretty clear to me. But to give them that option, and the secondhand smoke argument doesn't fly here. Everyone that's going to a hookah lounge is going there to smoke, and they're not going there to read a book. And I've been to them, and I see that. So I think we need to make that clear as well. But again, I'll be supporting what's in front of us today. I think it's a reasonable compromise that addresses both sides. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment on this item? We have a motion before us. I'll just offer a few brief comments. I'm not going to support the Darouz-Kakish motion for a number of reasons. If we believe that the Health Department and the Chief Medical Officer of Health then we shouldn't be prolonging the implementation of this particular bylaw. I think the City of Ottawa, more than any other city in Canada, can stand very proudly when they talk about the progressive measures they took many councils ago to bring in the most comprehensive smoke-free bylaw in Canada. And I had the honor of building on that when I was Minister of Health Promotion and implementing the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. And the Health Department has given us ample evidence of the health risks. The notion that let's let the Lebanese Festival have this tent, well, the tent is about 50 yards from the amusement rides. And that's sending a pretty bizarre signal to kids who are coming to the Lebanese Fun Fest to go to the Midway and have some great Lebanese food and so on, and then having to pass by this smoking tent, which we don't allow for tobacco smoke anywhere. We turned down Rideau Carleton Raceway. They wanted to have a separated area. The airport wanted to have separate smoking lounge, and we said no to all of those. The Legions, you remember that. The Legions wanted an exemption, and that was a very emotional debate. So I'd urge you not to vote for either one or two of this, and to support the recommendation that's come from the Health Department and from Community and Protective Services, where it was carried 9-1. So we've been asked to split the motion, so we'll have yeas and nays on item number 1, that the charging phase of the bylaw be amended to begin on September 30th, 2017. Yeas and nays, please.
Councillor Chernyshenko?
No.
Councillor El Shantiri?
Yes.
Councillor Brockington?
No.
Councillor Kadri?
No.
Councillor Cloutier?
No.
Councillor Harder?
No.
Councillor McKenney?
No.
Councillor Wilkinson?
No.
Councillor Nussbaum?
No.
Conseiller Fleury?
No.
Councillor Taylor?
No.
Conseiller Monette?
No.
Councillor Deans?
No.
Councillor Middick?
Yes.
Councillor Eglai?
No.
Councillor Hubley? Conseiller Blais?
No.
Councillor Moffat?
No.
Councillor Leeper?
No.
Councillor Tierney?
No.
Councillor DeRuse?
Yes.
Councillor Kakish? Mayor Watson?
No.
4 yeas, 19 nays.
So on item number 2, could we record the same vote, or do people have a different vote on that? Agreed on the same vote? On the same recorded vote? Okay, so changing your vote and everyone else the same? Is that agreed? Okay, so we'll just change Councillor Middick's vote for item number 2 to a
nay.
A nay. Then we have the main report on page 6 of your agenda. Carried. Dissent by Councillor DeRuse. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Levy and your staff for the good work that you did. The next item we have on our agenda is permanent signs on private property bylaw. And I know that Councillor Harder and Tierney, along with Councillors Moffat and DeRuse, have a motion. So we'll ask Councillor Harder to introduce her motion. My understanding, Councillor, is that this takes into account a number of the concerns that members on your committee had, and hopefully this will satisfy their interests, and we'll ask you to introduce the motion, seconded by Councillor Tierney. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor, and that's exactly what this does. And we took some time after it came to committee to have dialogue with councillors and with Mr. Frank Badin's department, and they're here to answer any further questions. But if you look at the motion where it says the whereas the Chair of Planning Committee directed staff to provide further information and clarification on, these were the things that were addressed as the concerns. specifically seasonal signs and signs for places of worship, feasibility of allowing larger signs than proposed for shopping centers, and existing digital signs that face onto the sidewalk. Councillor Fleury had a concern about an existing sign that he had in his area, and we've been able to, even though we're not going to affect grandfathered signage, staff have been able to accommodate the concerns of the councillor in that particular case. So it's going to be a lot of common sense as well, but we do have staff here to speak to any questions. I know that Councillor McKenney had a question specific to, I don't see her, so I'll ask the question, specific to Preston. Councillor McKenney, specific to Preston, is the question of the flashing signs and whether they would be allowed now in the part of Preston North. So I'm asking the question because she's trying to find the answer on her own, but there she is. I'm buying you time here. So, Francoise? So you could ask the question specific to Preston North.
Yeah, so my question is not so much about the flashing lights, it's about signage and how it applies to Preston Street North, because as many of you will remember, we pulled Preston Street North out of the traditional Main Street rezoning, and each block has got very specific and different zoning to it, some of it with different exceptions. So I think at this point, what I'd like to see us do is maybe just pull Preston Street North out of this report, and make sure that we are applying the sign bylaw very specific to those very specific zoning requirements and allowances, that because we don't have that answer right now.
Thank you. But I would say that since we have approved Preston North with conditions, that is just as much a grandfathered situation as we have with the situation we had in Vanier. Do we need legal on this, or Francoise or Mr. Miglis, are you going to?
Mr. Mayor, I was in charge of the rezoning project that touched Preston Street North, and the recommendations in the zoning that eventually were applied to Preston Street North had special and specific regard to the residential character of that stretch of the street. And as a result, the exceptions that were crafted were minutely prepared to recognize and limit the scale and types of commercial uses that are allowed to be introduced, limit lot sizes, and recognize the residential character and the mix that exists that is very unique to Preston Street. So in that regard, what Councillor McKenney is suggesting might make some sense in terms of ensuring that we can match the sign bylaw to that special character of that stretch of the street.
I guess my point is that I'm not sure that we need to do that, and I don't think we do, because I think that the way this is written, and because Preston North is already approved, therefore the conditions that exist there are the conditions. That was my understanding when we were talking about, is something grandfathered? The flashing light in Councillor Fleury's, could we stop that? Because we deal with just those kinds of things in this new sign bylaw. Permanent sign bylaw, and while we couldn't, we've dealt with it in a different way. So I don't understand why that wouldn't be protected. What is already the case and what is zoning allows there, and how restrictive it is, should be the permanent sign bylaw should feed into that, not the other way around.
In the zoning bylaw, we introduced new permissions for new and very limited commercial opportunities. Under the sign bylaw, there may be existing signs that would be grandfathered. What I think, if I'm understanding the councillor correctly, we're trying to address here is the possibility of new signage and how that new signage might be introduced.
Well, I'm not the legal authority, and maybe we need to have a legal person, but again, The fact is that we spent a lot of time on the Preston North. We isolated it, certain conditions. I don't understand why this would change that at all when we took the time to identify that.
Yeah, I think I've asked Councillor McKenney to talk to you, Councillor Harder, to see if we can come to a reasonable compromise. I think the notion is that there seems to be some concern, so if there's concern, my view is pull it out and pass the whole package without Preston. We can come back to that. So before we go on, I wanted also Councillor Moffat to introduce his motion because it's on the same topic of the bylaw, the signs bylaw. So Councillor Moffat, you have a motion, seconded by Councillor DeRuse, and then we can talk and question both at the same time. Councillor Moffat.
It's really isolated to the rural area and actually speaks more to a different bylaw, one that would pertain to public property, but it was items that came up throughout it was brought forward mainly from Osgood Ward, but there were some other concerns in other wards. And then we have historic signage that some is permitted, some isn't permitted because other municipalities had different rules. So a part of my ward that's actually former Nepean would not grandfather something where former Rideau would grandfather something. So we have some spots that they don't necessarily jive. So this fall, we're planning at least my office is planning to do some consultation with rural businesses anyways, small businesses, and it would be a good opportunity to discuss this. So essentially the motion just says, Planning Committee, whereas Planning Committee recommended at its meeting on July 12, 2016, that Council approve the proposed new permanent signs on private property bylaw, and whereas there are some unique needs regarding directional signage for businesses in rural villages that require further review, and whereas consultations will be held with rural businesses in the fall on matters of mutual interest and concern, and directional signage may be discussed, therefore be it resolved that Council directs staff to consider any recommendations that emerge from the above-mentioned consultations with respect to directional signage for rural villages in the context of, 1, the objectives set out for signage in the proposed permanent signs on private property bylaw, and 2, the possibility of enhancing existing rural directional signage opportunities. So we have some bylaws that speak to signage on public property in the rural area as to how we identify farms, how we identify places like Saunders Farm and different things like that. So we're seeing if, is there a possibility where we could help some isolated villages that aren't on main streets have signage that directs residents easier to the businesses and whatnot, but doesn't actually blight the landscape that we have now sometimes with the larger signs occurring with about 10 or so in one field. So this is just further review of that, and Councillor DeRuse and myself and the other rural councillors will look at this in the coming months. Thanks.
Okay, so this, while it has to do with the signs, it's really more specific to the rural areas. I think it's really more of a direction. So on this motion, carried? Carried. Okay, so now we're back to Councillor Harder's motion, seconded by Councillor Tierney, and the main report. So if Councillor Fleury could deal with both those items at the same time, the floor is yours.
Mr. Mayor, certainly I have no problem with the motion. I just wanted to ask a few questions and speak of the report, starting by thanking staff for the consultation, especially in Lower Town and Byward Market area, where residents were concerned around signage in a heritage district and what that would mean. So thank you for that, and I see the key recommendations as part of the report. I'll go back, and I'd like, Françoise, if you could clarify the perspective. So between committee and now, we've been able, the business that was highlighted by Councillor Harder, we were able to remove the strobing lights. So which authority is that we've currently have has given us that power? Could you highlight that?
Yes, Mayor. We've been able to do that to get the strobe light removed through the use of the property standards bylaw. So because it's a potential distraction and could be a potential safety issue. Under the new bylaw, we're adding some wording, and that was included in the memo we circulated to councillors and is in the motion, to specifically include strobe lights as a prohibition from the animations. So a sign that in the future would be covered through our new bylaw, the prohibition of a strobe light.
Excellent. And just could you clarify as well the grandfathering portion? So I understand most of the existing signs are grandfathered. For those where we did not have rules, those digital boards or even the ones that change wording. So I'm not thinking the open that goes O-P-E-N. I'm thinking, the other ones where there's more wording, more letters, sorry. How would those apply in this context?
Mayor, what we're regulating now under the new bylaw is illuminated signs inside windows. They previously were not regulated, so any of those existing illuminated window signs are grandfathered. But once the bylaw comes into place, any new signs that are illuminated inside a window for commercial business or service would require a permit and would be regulated in terms of the size, where they can be placed, etc.
So they are grandfathered, but if they are a distraction to neighbors, pedestrians, drivers, we would enforce similar to what we've done in the previous case under a property standards bylaw. So just to clarify that point.
Mr. Mayor, I can speak to that. So conditions or objects that create a hazardous condition, we can regulate under the property standards bylaw. So that's what we've done in the past, specific to the concern that you had.
So at committee, I highlighted the concerns over the grandfathering element, but my understanding is that now that with these components, even if some are grandfathered, if they are problematic, we could address them through property standard. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair to say, but new signs that are would now have to be permitted, illuminated window signs, would have to follow our rules, which also say they can't be animated or be flashing or create a disturbance as well. So that would be under the new signs that are through our bylaw now.
Perfect. So I just want to highlight how the report is complex. There's obviously a lot of history and signage. There's a demand for the new types of signage, and we know that some of the businesses can take advantage of inside the windows, but we've put some clear parameters that allow for a consistent approach and also protecting the public realm. So I want to thank staff for the work. Thank you.
Merci, conseiller. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be at the meeting what was discussed, but I had a couple of clarifications I'd like to find out about. First of all, it says that a street includes the pedestrian pathway, so that means that places like the Outlet Mall, which has an internal sidewalk, or the place in the Centrum where they're internal, is covered completely by this sign bylaw? So they're not any visible to anybody except people in that area.
Under our bylaw, sometimes we do have the internal pathways as if it was the inside of a commercial plaza. So, for example, Tangier Mall, if it's completely internal, may be considered as not a sign that's on the outside.
So these ones don't have a roof on them, so they're open to the air.
If they have no roof, they're completely open, then the rules would apply. So you're speaking about the Centrum in Canada?
Yeah, the Centrum has the City Walk, for example. It's just an example. There's others in the city. So that would, even though it doesn't have any impact on residential or anybody else around, because you can't see them anywhere else. Okay. It doesn't create a subfight problem. The other second question I had was, it was raised at the time, I know, about seasonal things like Christmas decorations and various other things, and I didn't clearly see when I was trying to find it that you actually, if somebody puts a Santa Claus in their window, that I take it that's not a sign. I can't hear you.
In the memo we sent to the councillors, we did explain that we were changing the wording of the definition of a sign, so it would clearly eliminate those personal expressions. So putting a Santa Claus in front of your house, if it's not associated with a business, is not a sign.
What about Tim Hortons Picnic Day when they put drawings in the windows and it says Tim Hortons on them? Is that considered then a sign?
If they put drawings inside a window and it's not illuminated, that's not considered a sign under our new bylaw.
Okay, that's good. You said in here it says that a Message centers permitted for a school, place of worship, recreation, and athletic facilities provided in the several provisions, but it has to be along an arterial or major collector road. But some schools are not on either of those roads, and some churches are not on either of those roads. Does that mean a church on a residential street could not do this?
Mayor, they'd be able to have a message center, the traditional ones, which are not the digitals. We're speaking about the message centers here that are digitals that change, can change every so often. But those other places that are not on arterials can continue to have message centers that are what we call the manual message centers. And the reason why we're not permitting digital message centers on local roadways where there's places of worship or schools is because usually those are in the middle of residential areas, and most of the public feel that those message centers could be take away from their enjoyment of their homes when they're that close to them. So that's the reason why we're only allowing the digitals on the more heavily traveled roadways.
I think this is something you're going to have to look at in the future, because digital is taking over, as you know, and they can be done in a way that they're not so obtrusive. And I think it's just putting a sort of an extra on those simply because of history where they're located in a way. I guess the best thing to do is to try it out and see if it creates a problem and then deal with it. Okay. Those are the issues that I had, and thank you for that. So I think a little bit of concern about the walkway areas, because sometimes they need the signs and people see what's in there. It's just the flashing and things. One other question that came up. When a business changes name because it's bought out, just like, for example, Alcatel-Lucent was bought out by Nokia, they had to change the name. Same company, same people, different name. And I've had problems with some of them saying they had to go back to square one as if it's a brand new sign with all sorts of costs and things. Have you identified in here how you've got it so that they can maintain them, but I didn't see if you said if the business changes hands, you just notify them, but if the business changes name, same business, how do you deal with it? Because it happens in the high tech all the time.
Mayor, I'm not, normally our practice has been if the sign is exactly the same other than the copy's changing, so there's no physical change to the sign, normally we do not require a new permit for that. So if it's a simple business change, but sometimes they do make a physical change to the sign which would require a new permit.
Well, if it says Alcatel-Lucent long name and it says Nokia short name and the name's different. I've done it, I know it, they're already done, but. And the other thing is community signs. Now entrance to community things that are now requirement to be looked after by the community associations. Are those covered under here?
Mayor, could you just repeat that about the community associations?
Like there's a sign that says Briarbrook, and I know when they want to
Counselor, can you speak closer to the microphone?
Sorry. It's a community association signs for neighborhoods. Like Briarbrook, they had to replace that one, and I had to take it to committee to get it approved in the end because there wasn't a way of dealing with it properly. But there's a lot of these community ones that are getting a bit deteriorated. I see you've got in there they can repair any sign, so I guess that would come under that clause. But if they wanted to replace it with a more improved sign, do they have to go through the whole same as if it was a business, or how do they deal with it?
Mayor, if it's a new structure, they would require a new permit, yes.
But if it's repair, they can just repair it?
If it's a repair and it's the same as it was originally approved, then there's no permit required.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I agree with the amendment. I think that's an improvement overall, so I'm happy to support that. What bothers me in this report, though, is item number 3, the shopping center signage. It says staff have been asked to consider the feasibility of further increasing the permitted size of ground signs for large shopping centers. I'm guessing it wasn't the community that was asking for bigger signage at large shopping centers, so who was asking?
It was primarily the shopping centers, some of the major shopping center owners, and particularly one, well-known shopping developer who has asked for larger shopping center signs, but primarily has been asking for larger electronic message centers as part of those shopping center signs.
So the electronic one would not be permitted if Councillor Harder's motion passes?
It would not be permitted as big as what they would like. So we are increasing a little bit the size of the electronic message centers. In the outside the Greenbelt, we're proposing an increase from 6 meters squared to 7.5 meters squared. I'm just speaking about the electronic message center. Yeah. They would like much more than that. They've been asking for much more than that.
Okay, but I'm looking at the examples that you have on page 10 and 11 of the report, just the big signage at big shopping centers. So I'm thinking about, for example, South Keys in my area. They have a whopping big sign there now. I'm sure I can see it from at least a kilometer away. This would allow them to upsize that sign?
What we're doing is we are permitting an increase in the size of the shopping center, the total size from 20 meters squared to 25 meters squared. I'm not exactly sure if South Keys might have gotten a variance, but most of the shopping centers are about the 20 meters squared. So we would be allowing a little bit more to allow for more tenant identification, but the issue is more the size of the message center, and I don't think there's a message center on the South Keys one right now, a changing message center. So the example that we have does show a message center being in the middle there.
Is that the woman's face?
Yes, that's correct. So for South Keys, I don't think there's a message center right now, but there probably would be a desire to be able to have a new sign there in the future with a message center. That's where they're...
But the new sign, presuming they didn't get variance, because I don't believe they did. I remember at the time the community was not happy with the size of the signage going there. So presumably they would be able to upsize their sign if this were to change.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I don't agree with that. I think that's a bad idea. I think it's very excessive. This is, in my opinion, visual blight. Beyond being able to read it and know that the shopping mall is there, anything that just supersizes those signs is visual blight, in my opinion. I'm sure the shopping centers want it, but I don't believe the community has any interest in seeing these signs grow. And for that reason, I'm just going to be voting against this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Englai.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dean's asked some of the questions that I had about sign size, but I also want to ask, I noticed in the preamble we talk about seasonal signs and religious signs, and that this is meant to fix it, but when I look through the motion, I'm not quite sure how it fixes it. So I want some confirmation that for churches, synagogues, temples, that at particular times of year, whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah or Easter or Eid or whatever, that there's no impact. They'll still be able to advertise services or special events related to the religious services or celebrations. It wasn't clear to me, and I just want on the record that that's all still okay, and nothing we're suggesting here is going to impact negatively on that.
Mayor, if you're speaking about, for example, temporary messages that speak to activities, etc., those would fall under the temporary signs bylaw, not the permanent signs bylaw. Similarly, with seasonal decorations, etc., those would fall under the temporary signs bylaw on a, for example, place of worship. This bylaw deals with permanent signs, and it's not dealing with signs that are of a temporary nature.
No, but if you have a permanent sign that flashes messages, right, the sign doesn't go anywhere, the message changes. And so at certain times of year, the religious institution would be sending different messages related to whatever the season or the celebration was. They're still allowed to do that. Nothing's going to impact negatively in what you're suggesting here today?
Mary, that's correct. They will be allowed to, depending on what zone they're in, a place of worship will be able to change its messages either every 20 seconds, or if they're more in a residential area but on an arterial or collector road, it'll be every 6 minutes. They can change the message. The content of the message is not regulated by the bylaw. So whether they're, as long as it's related to the place of worship, to that site, an on-premise message. So there's nothing in this bylaw that would preclude a place of worship from having messages about activities of a seasonal nature taking place at that location.
It just wasn't clear from the what was, sometimes when we do these motions, we say replace this and put this in, and we don't know the full context. So thank you for that.
Councillor Nussbaum, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I dissented on this item at Planning Committee, and I just simply want to explain here at Council why I did so. I think there's a lot of good things in the report, but one major concern I had in the report related to the changes, the proposed changes to billboards. And specifically, one of the proposed changes relates to the separation distance in urban areas in the city of Ottawa. And the proposal essentially is to change the separation distance, which is right now 150 meters radius, to essentially allow 150-meter radius on the same side of the street. So it would have the effect of potentially, if there were no other zoning exemptions or restrictions, doubling the number of billboards permitted on a particular artery, because, again, the proposal is to change the definition of the 150-meter radius to apply only on the same street side. I think in light of the fact that although residents, I think, accept that some billboards are part of, the urban landscape, I don't think there was a convincing rationale in the staff report why we ought to allow for the potential doubling of them in the urban landscape. They are visual pollution. Increasingly, cities across North America and elsewhere are actually moving in the other direction, recognizing that, people want to reclaim the public airspace away from the commercialization. Again, I'm not saying that some amount of billboards isn't reasonable given the provincial landscape, but again, unconvinced why in 2016 we would move to potentially allow for more billboards in the urban space. And so that was the reason why I voted against this at planning, and why I'll be voting against it here at council. Thank you.
So just to clarify, is that the case?
Mary, yes. Currently, billboards have a number of criteria that they have to meet, and one of the criteria under the current bylaw is that you can't have one directly across the street usually, like on each side of the street.
One across the street from another?
Directly across the street from another, because there's 150-meter separation distance between the two, and usually the rights-of-ways are less than that. So it pushes the billboard a little further away from the one across the street under the current bylaw. Under the proposed bylaw, we are eliminating that regulation. However, billboards still have to meet many other requirements. They still have to be 150 meters from each other on the same side of the street. They have to be 300 meters away from any residential use. They have to be set back, from intersections, et cetera, et cetera. So we were just eliminating one of the regulations.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
With respect to that.
Councillor McKenney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to pick up on that, though, because, again, I support this report, and I think that there's a lot of good work that's gone into it. But if I understand correctly, though, that means that potentially where you used to have one billboard on one side of the street, now you will have two. So you are, in essence, in the urban area, doubling within 150 meters the number of billboards on one side of the street. They're not the same. I understand that. Two different messages, but we are still, say, in a 150-block space. Rather than two, we can now have 4 billboards. Is that correct? Oh, sorry, within 300 meters, we can now have 4 billboards. Is that correct?
Mayor, what this does, using the analogy of doubling, theoretically, that might be it if we were dealing with a clean slate of, zoning that permitted billboards everywhere, but that's not the reality. In fact, there's only maybe a few situations where somebody could now put a billboard directly across the street. And the reason is because if it's in an area where billboards, the companies want to locate billboards, they will have usually located it across the street, but further north or south or, further up or down from directly across. So there already is one across the street, typically, on a lot of the major roadways that we see, but it's just a little further away to meet that 150-meter setback. So they would not be able to insert a new one directly across the street because they still have to meet the 150 meters beside each other. So theoretically, it appears that it would be doubling, but the reality is that it wouldn't because of that, the existing bylaw, which still requires 150 meters along the same side of the street for billboards to be located.
Okay, yeah, I get that, but it's still, even though theoretically, I understand what you're saying, there will be instances, or there can very well be instances, where we will see a doubling of billboards. We will see an increase in the number of billboards along a street in the urban area. And I'm just not, I'm unsure and I'm unconvinced as to what the benefit is to the area, to residents. What is that benefit?
Most of the places where there are opportunities for billboards tends to be on streets that are that don't have any residential nearby, because really that is the controlling factor right now, is because we have a 300-meter light shed setback from residential zones. A lot of our streets that have, say, our arterials that have residential, say, across the street, essentially prohibit the location of billboards. Yeah, so most of the billboards that would be permitted would be in, say, streets with a lot of industrial zones, or, primarily all commercial, very little residential nearby.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but, if we take the downtown, for example, we still are concerned about our public space and the public realm and what is visual and what is available to you. So I get that it's not in a residential area, but you're still moving around a space where you will potentially and likely, I think, have a doubling of billboards. And I guess I'm just unconvinced as to what the need for that is. So I think I'm going to move a motion that we just simply amend that permitted use. So it's table 6B. Just to remove, to delete the words after billboard, so that we still have 150 meters from the nearest part of any other static billboard, but we remove on the same side of the street oriented to the same oncoming traffic. And the reason, Mr. Mayor, for that is really, I think that, we have to continue to protect our public space, even in commercial areas. It's easy to think of, going out into some big industrial area and what does it matter? I think it still does, but there are many other areas in the urban area where we'll want to keep those protections. So my motion will simply be to delete the words after billboard on table 6B, A, that says on the same side of the street oriented to the same oncoming traffic.
Okay, so if you're going to write that out,
yep.
We'll see it when you have it. Councillor Chernyshenko, are you the last speaker? Anyone else want to speak on this?
Yeah, I guess I've certainly have great interest in seeing what that might look like, because while I'm somewhat placated by hearing it's highly unlikely given other conditions, when I hear theoretically that's possible, that's enough concern for me. Theoretically, you might have, doubling the number of billboards. I'd like to see what we can do so we can make that not theoretically possible, since that seems to be the intent anyway.
Okay, so we'll just wait for that. We have the Harder-Tierney motion, and just to let everyone know, friendly amendment Councillor McKenney has brought forward that Councillor Harder has agreed to, and I'll read it to you. We add on item number 4, that properties fronting on or backing onto Preston Street between Somerset Street and Albert Street be exempt from the proposed new permanent signs bylaw, with a direction to staff to come forward to Planning Committee with the current bylaw in force on August 30th to continue to apply to these lands until new regulations are passed. So that's friendly. And I think we can deal with this now and just come back to your motion, Councillor McKenney, as you get it typed up. So we have the Harder-Tierney motion with a friendly amendment from Councillor McKenney on the motion. Carried. All right, so we'll just wait, and then we'll deal with the main motion, and here it comes here. So that Table 6B be amended to delete the words after, quote, billboards. So that's moved by McKenney, seconded by Fleury. Councillor Harder, did you, as the chair of the committee, wish to comment on this?
Well, it's a surprise because it didn't come up before when we've dealt with this, and we've had lots of time over the summer, and we've had memos that have come out, and I don't know if Mr. Bedin would tell you whether he had anybody commenting, nobody, in the time frame at all. So it is a surprise, and therefore I would like to have comment from Mr. Bedin on this, please.
A comment from who?
From our Chief Building Inspector.
Okay.
Officer.
So Frank, tell us what this motion would do and your thoughts
If it doesn't,
on it.
if it doesn't concern you, Frank, I mean, if you understand. So if we could read out the motion for him, please.
That Table 6B be amended to delete the words after, quote, billboard, end quote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regards to the
You have
motion,
to speak really close and loud.
pardon me, with respect to the motion, the 6B refers directly to digital billboards. So I think we may need to revise that slightly with respect to 6A as well, if we're looking at the separation distance for both digital and static billboards.
That was my intent, 6A and B. It's just about removing on the same side of the street, oriented to the same oncoming traffic.
Okay.
That's all I was looking for.
Well, I think, as I understand it, what you're trying to accomplish is to ensure that you keep the 150-meter regardless of what side of the street it's on.
Exactly, so that we don't have a doubling of billboards
So,
on the
Councillor
same
Harder,
side of
I
the
think
street.
this is probably reasonable, given that clarification.
Wanted to
So I
have
just added in 6A.
Sure, I just wanted to have clarification from staff. They put a lot of time into this.
Thank you for that. Okay, so the new motion will be McKenney, Fleury, that tables 6A and 6B be amended to delete the words after billboard. Is that correct, staff? Okay, on the motion? Carried. On the report as amended? Carried. Dissent by Councillor Deans. Okay, so motion to adopt reports. Motion portant adoption de rapport. Councillors Moffat and Middock, please.
That Agricultural Affairs Committee Report 19, I think I slurred my words there. Community Protective Services, sheesh, it's been a long day. It hasn't been long, it's just that there's been so much shisha secondhand smoke on this side of the table that I'm getting my words. Community Protective Services Committee Report 16 and Planning Committee Reports 29A and 30 be received and adopted as amended.
The motion carried. Motion requiring suspension of the rules of procedure. Councillor Harder, seconded by Councillor Moffat. We need a suspension of the rules because of the timeliness of the construction season. On suspension, carried. Councillor Harder, if you'd like to introduce the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to be clear, everyone, I didn't send this out, but it's a map of, for those of you that don't know anything about Barrhaven or haven't seen the building, it is very close to the 416, at the edge of the Costco parking lot. So not the building. The building is tucked at the 416 side of the property. It's still 300 meters, 281 meters to the closest other side of Strandherd. Additionally to this, it's something that I am putting forward because it's about the inside, and it's the rare cases that they'll need to do work 24/7 on the inside. That could be for like drywall, electrical, finishing tile in the washrooms, that sort of thing. It is very important, I'm sure beyond Barrhaven, but the excitement in Barrhaven, I mean, to allow this to open in advance of Christmas. And since it's on the inside of the building.
Carried.
Thank you.
Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Look forward to Costco.
I could bleed some more if you need me to.
Okay, next item requiring suspension of the rules is moved by Councillor Cloutier, seconded by Councillor Fleury, because there's a time deadline of September 2nd for the Community Celebration Program of the Province of Ontario for 150. On suspension, carried. Councillor Cloutier, if you'd like to introduce it as the co-chair of the 2017 with Councillor Fleury.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Thank you, colleagues, for the suspension of the rules. I'll go quickly. Il y a 5 étant donné.
There are 5 whereases dealing with the deadlines for the Ontario 150 candidacy.
The number of applications per funding program and the project readiness and the affordability. I'll just do the thereofs. Thereof be it resolved that Council approve the City of Ottawa prioritized list of projects for submission to the 4 Ontario 150 funding programs announced on July 6, 2016, attached as Document 1, and be it further resolved that Council delegate the authority to the City Treasurer to identify funding sources for the projects approved by the Province of Ontario through the Ontario 150 funding program, subject to any annual budget approval, and direct city staff to complete and submit the formal funding request to the province for the projects identified on the prioritized City of Ottawa list of projects, Document 1.
Okay. So on the report, adopté, carried. There's another item that was notice of motion, but Councillor Caudry has asked that we move it to a motion requiring suspension of the rules with respect to the Erica Weeb Gymnasium, Erica Weeb. I'm seconding it because of the timing of Ms. Weeb's next visit to Ottawa, because she's back in Calgary training. So on suspension of the rules, carried. Councillor Caudry, if you'd like to introduce the motion and maybe tell Council a little bit about the great celebration you had out in Stittsville last week.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for, first of all, seconding this motion, and more importantly, for attending the event last Thursday in Stittsville in honor of Erica Weeb. Erica Weeb grew up in Stittsville. She's a resident of Stittsville. Her family is right now. She's residing in Calgary at the present time. And as the Mayor just mentioned, we wanted to name the gymnasium in Goulburn Rec Complex in her honor. And because of the timeline of her visit coming up, and we wanted to finalize the details of that, I'm asking for this motion to be moved today at Council to see if we can accept it today so we can start the process going forward. The name or the gymnasium name has been vetted through the emergency services and does not pose any concern with respect to name duplications or any of those concerns. And I think it's a great honor, not only for Erica, but also for the city to have a gold medalist within amongst us. And I think there's going to be more in the future in 2020 and beyond. So I think it's an appropriate motion to go forward with as soon as possible. So thank you, and I'm looking for your support.
Great. Questions, comments? On the motion, carried. Congratulations again to Erica, and thank you, Councillor Caudry. Are there any other motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure at this time? Est-ce qu'il y a des autres motions? Notice is a motion for consideration of subsequent meeting. Councillor El-Shantiri, seconded by Councillor Moffat, with respect to the feed-in tariff program. I think we mentioned that I think what we want to try to do in the future is have this blanket approval so they don't keep coming back. But apparently when we did it last time, it was just a one-year period, and the 1 year is up. So we'll deal with it again now, but I think direction to staff is that we do it for the term of council, because most of these are non-contentious, and I think if it has the ward councillor support, that makes sense. So, Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and both notes of motion for next council meeting, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Moffat. One of the motion is it talks about the rooftop solar general project, and that received the former. So basically, as you said, Mr. Mayor, this is for 12 months, and I'm hoping our staff can increase this at least for the end of term, because they keep coming back. And we have another, the second motion, so one for the rooftop and one for the ground-mounted solar PV project. So we'll deal with them in the next council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll deal with that next month. Next is notice of motion from Councillor Leeper, seconded by myself, with respect to encroachment at 1385 Wellington Street West. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A small motion for our next council meeting. A local diner wants to put in fold-back windows that would project a small amount into the public right-of-way. The same establishment could, as of right, put a table and chairs without requiring any permission into that space. So just helping him get some windows in place. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your support on that.
Are there any other notices of motion at this time? No, motion to introduce bylaws. Motion portant présentation de règlement. Conseiller Moffat et Medic, s'il vous plaît.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Middick. The bylaws listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaws. 3 readings be read and passed.
Carried. Adopté. Merci. Confirmation bylaw. Councillors Moffat and Middick.
That the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting of August 31st, 2016.
Carried. Councillor Tim Tierney I just want him to bring members of council up to date on a very good initiative that he brought forward that helps in our budget consultation process. Councillor Tierney, congratulations.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is just real quickly, based on last year's inquiry about looking at using online tools for budgeting to give yet another avenue for constituents to tell us what they feel, because frankly, when we were doing our regional meetings, there are small numbers of people coming out. Now we're crashing malls like the Eastern Bloc, but this is just yet another tool, and I'd like to thank the Mayor and specifically staff. There's a lot of work that has gone into this, and for those listening at home, if you visit ottawa.ca or go to ottawa.citybudget.com, you can make the same kind of decisions that we make here at City Hall, where you have 15 categories, and you can actually put in your own impact assessment, your value of your home, and use scroll bars to determine how much plus or minus in categories your taxes would increase or decrease on base what you want. So that feedback's very important. So again, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and a tremendous thanks to staff.
And thank you for first bringing up the idea. I should also mention our colleague, Councillor Taylor, was re-elected to the board of AMO, so congratulations on that and being our voice at that table. Councillor Moffat, adjournment, please, seconded by Councillor Middick.
Just before I do this, I just thought I'd let you know Councillor DeRuz was hoping to congratulate Councillor Taylor, and you've stolen that thunder from him. So he was expressing his disdain for that. That the proceedings of the City Council meeting of 31st of August 2016 be adjourned.
The motion carried. Adopté. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned. Merci.